Well, welcome everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started. Today, the topic of today's webinar is Mastering Marketing Personalization. We're going to talk through the different ways that you can align your content with your audience and then use technology to personalize that content as it reaches your audience. For some of the folks on the call, I recognize you. This is going to be a review. Um, for the first half, and then maybe some new and exciting stuff in the second half. But for others, this will all be new. So I'm going to dive right in. Oh, sorry. As a matter of housekeeping, please remind everyone, please post your questions into the chat. We will address them at the end, unless it is something more immediate, in which case I will jump on it as we present. And if you registered for this webinar, you will get the slides emailed to you in the next day or so. If you did not register, there will be a QR code at the end to get those slides. All right, a little bit about me. My name is Steve Robinson. I am the founder and CEO of Brilliant Metrics. I am formerly a software developer turned marketer. I've spent the last 15 years or so in marketing. In addition to my role at Brilliant Metrics, I do teach a variety of courses at UW-Milwaukee School of Continuing Ed. And I am married with 3 young children who will not interrupt this webinar because they are actually all at school today. So a little bit about Brilliant Metrics. If you aren't familiar with us, we are a B2B digital first agency, meaning we start with digital. We have no problem with traditional tactics. They definitely have a role, but we like to start where it's more measurable. And our clients really look to us not just to help them execute their marketing, but to help them continuously improve, both as marketers, as a team, and the impact that they're making and the technology that they're using, basically across the board. We help our clients grow. Enough with the commercials. Let's get into the agenda. First, I want to cover why personalization is so important. And then we're going to get into 3 different vectors on which you can personalize your content. We'll talk about how you do that from a content side, and then we'll talk about how you do that from a delivery side. So why is personalization so important? Well, the reality is in the last 10, 15, 20 years or so, the amount of information that the average person parses through has just increased, well, exponentially. So between 2008 and 2018, the time that we spend with digital media has increased by 130%. And that's just digital media. In reality, our lives as a whole have gotten more noisy. If you look at in 1980, we had to parse around 7 gigabytes of data, information. That could be radio, television, signage that we're walking past or driving past, the conversations with our brother or our spouse. All of that information amounted to about 7 gigabytes. Today, it's estimated that that's, well, 74 gigabytes. And to get geeky about this, okay, so a gigabyte is like, I think it's 8,000 bits, ones and zeros. Our brain can only process about 120 bits of information per second. And so in order for us to be able to do this 74 gigabytes of data every day, we have to throw away 99.9% of what we see and hear before it ever hits the part of our brain that can actually process it. We have to filter out 99.9% of it, or we start to go crazy. The good news is we actually have a part of the brain to do this. In the last few years, some scientists I believe it was the University of Montreal, found the actual neurons in our brains that are responsible for doing this filtering. They're located in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that helps you make decisions and stay on task, or not stay on task, as some of us may more accurately describe us. But that part of the brain is really designed for focusing our attention. And there are neurons that are specifically designed for filtering information. In behavioral economics, so not talking about neuroscience, but in behavioral economics, the application of this in the world that we live in, Daniel Kahneman, in his great book Thinking Fast and Slow, actually coined a phrase System One versus System Two, and System One is the system inside your brain that is constantly monitoring your environment, filtering information, and passing through what's important to System Two. System Two is the part of your brain that actually thinks about things. So we have this. If we didn't have this, we wouldn't survive. But more importantly, all of our prospects and our customers have this filter in the front of their brain, literally in the front of their brain, to help keep them sane. So, how do we break through? Well, as marketers, our best bet in breaking through is to provide content that is hyper relevant to our prospects. So, if we provide content that is hyper relevant, it means that that system one that is filtering everything that we're encountering in our environment will pass that information through to the part of our brain that actually thinks about it, or more importantly, act on it. Because that filter is looking for things that are really important to today and right now and this moment. And it knows all of the problems that you might have going on. It knows the context in which you work and operate. It knows your job, it knows everything about you in order to determine what is relevant to pass it through. So, when we talk about hyperrelevance, we're really talking about three different vectors or dimensions on which we can create that relevance, at least in B2B. B2C, this is a little bit different, but we're talking specifically about B2B. In the B2B world, we have one vector, one angle we can make something relevant is the market segment. So the industry in which our prospects and customers operate. The other vector is persona, what their role is, what their job is, what their identity is, their worldview. These two are static. They don't change much over time unless people get new jobs or change their roles or the world drastically changes. People stay pretty much fixed wherever they are inside of this market segment and wherever they sit in all the lines of persona. What changes over time, though, is their buyer's journey. And so I call this over here in the bullet point state of mind because this is really where their head's at right now. And so if I'm one of your prospects and I see a message that is seemingly specific to my industry that I work in, specific to my role within that industry, and nails where I'm at in my buyer's journey, where my head's at, what I'm worried about, what I'm thinking about, and what I'm concerned about right now, of course I'm going to let that through because it's hyper personalized to exactly where I am and who I am. So let's talk about how we do that. Let's start with market segmentation. So this is that vertical bar on this little pseudo three-dimensional little graph here. We work with our clients on a regular basis to help them set up a logical systems of market segments and market subsegments. Usually these are by industry or sector, but we'll often have a channel component. So if you're in manufacturing, you probably have a manufacturer's rep or multiple of them, right? You might have dealers or installers. You might have consultants or architects who are involved in specifying your product. Um, all of those folks sit down inside a channel, and then beyond that, you're looking at different operating environments for the stuff you make or sell. Having a two-tier system lets you personalize things generically at a market segment level, and then personalize things very specifically down at a sub-segment level, depending on the level of content that you're producing. It's really important that you have clear, distinctive edges between your market segments and subsegments. This is especially true if you find yourself making this a little bit more complicated than just industry. Having these edges defined, not only between segments, but also what is a valid target within that segment, will help you personalize your content. Because the last thing you want to be doing is personalizing content to the bad fits within a given market segment. So take the time to write down on paper, what does this segment mean and what is a good prospect, a good account inside of this market segment? Now, the question I often get is, how many segments should I have? And the answer is as few as you can get away with. But the reality is that there are times that we have to split segments, and recognizing when it is appropriate to split a segment, when it's not, is really important. The key thing to think of when you're deciding whether or not you need to split a segment and personalize your content either down to the subsegment level or even split a subsegment into two is when the words or concepts or the topics or the way you're framing things for one audience to pull them in pushes away another important group within that same audience. So if I can't use the same language cohesively across the entire segment, then it's time to split. But if I can talk about everything the same way within this market segment, and it's always going to pull the same majority of the market segment in, then I'm pretty well set in that segment existing as it stands, and any ideas I have about splitting it are probably a little bit flawed. So that's market segment. Really, that's how you personalize down to an account level to get the right message for a given set of accounts or a set of companies. The next level is the people within those companies, and that's where we get to persona segmentation. Because at the end of the day, companies don't make decisions, companies don't read your content, companies don't engage with your offers. A lot of organizations will start with roles instead of personas. They'll define like this is our content for the marketing director, or this is our content for the production manager, or this is our content for the marketing person. But that leaves a lot of value on the table because when you're just talking about a role, it's really hard to engage those muscles within our brains that allow us to empathize with another individual, regardless of whether they're real or fake. A persona gives you that chance to do that, at least if it's done well. So for example, take a look at the audience profile up on the page. This would be an example of an audience profile or a role definition for a plant manager. You've got some demographics, you've got some pain points and some goals and some content needs. If you were given this to produce content, you'd be able to basically take and produce a piece of content for each pain point, each goal, and each content need, but that would be about it, and then you'd kind of be left on your own. It's really hard to personalize content for this person just given what's on the page. But if I flip that and I give you something like this, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to empathize with Jerry here. You start to understand what it's like to be Jerry. You start to create some intuitive connections to what other content might be valuable to him or where else you could go reference some other ideas in order to really provide content of value to Jerry. So how do you identify your personas? Well, fundamentally, anytime you're in a sales situation, you have a decision maker. You have probably an executive sponsor, somebody who's going to help coordinate between teams and departments and make something happen, or maybe they hold the purse strings. You have direct reports that then are influencers in that decision-making process, and then within your organization, there's often corollaries or peers with alongside your decision maker that could also be influential in the sale. Really, though, you don't care as much about the peers or the corollaries. You care about who are your potential champions. Who are the people that are going to be the ones that bring you in to their company? Those are the folks you want to make sure you have personas built for. So those are often going to either start from the top down. The executive said that I needed to talk to you. Bottom up, a direct report, somebody who's actually the end user of your product or service is going to come in and say, hey, we need to change vendors because this is not cutting it anymore. Or it obviously could be the decision maker themselves. So once you have your personas identified, then you can start to cater your content and deliver your content to those personas. The third and final vector for personalization is the buyer's journey. This is the one where we're putting the other two in motion, right? You have a set of accounts you're personalizing for, you have a role that you're personalizing for. Now we're going to talk about where in the buyer's journey, or more importantly, I guess when in the buyer's journey, your content is most appropriate. I have to throw this slide in as big a letters as I can get away with within our style guide here. The buyer's journey is not your sales process or funnel. So a lot of organizations will end up mapping their content and personalizing their content to what we need to say to a prospect when they are at this point in our sales process. Well, your sales process is really just a matter of gating and deciding when a particular deal or opportunity has passed enough qualifications to move to the next stage, which is a series of activities from the sales team. None of that has anything to do with the prospect's state of mind directly. It might indirectly, because that could be part of that staging or gating, but it certainly doesn't help you in the process of trying to connect the dots on the content that you need to personalize, right? So our favorite model for mapping out the buyer's journey is See Think Do. It's from this guy Avinash Kaushik. He's a brilliant guy over at Google. Um, and we've taken his See Think Do framework and adapted it a little bit on the tail end because we didn't like the last thing that he put out there. And quite frankly, I'm not sure he likes the last thing he threw out there. So we replaced, I think, a love or care with grow and give. The reason we like this is because it's from the perspective of the buyer. So it enables that empathy. It helps you better get in touch with what's going on inside your prospect's head as you're working to personalize this content. So the first stage is C. And in the C stage, I might see content related to your product or service, but adding or changing vendors is really the last thing on my mind. I'm happy. I'm in a state of homeostasis. I'm comfortable. We're good, right? In that scenario, your content will be filtered out unless it is otherwise relevant to your prospect's world. It has to relate to some problem, issue, or challenge that they've faced all the time, regardless of whether or not they're happy with their current vendor or their current solution in your product space. The next stage is think, or state is think. In think state, your prospect has a problem that you could help with, right? Or maybe they have an opportunity that they're exploring that you can help with. But here's the key: they haven't made a commitment to themselves or to anyone else within their organization to actually make a change. So without that commitment, there's no time frame, there's no immediacy, there's no action necessarily. They just know something is coming or could be coming, or they want to do something at some point in the future. And the key difference here between see and think is now all of a sudden that filter that we talked about, well, it starts to let some of this messaging through. Because if you decide that you want a new car, now you start actually paying attention to the ads on the television or on YouTube, but from the car dealerships. You start to pay attention to what kind of cars are around you while you're driving down the road in ways that you didn't before, even though you might not have the budget for the new car this year, or maybe you haven't talked to your spouse about replacing your car yet. So there's no commitment to actually replace your car, but because you had that thought and you took it seriously that, I really want a new car, your eyes are open to that new car, to that messaging around cars. Same thing is true of your prospects. They have this think state in the middle before they enter do state. And when they enter do state, this is the point at which they've made a commitment to themselves or somebody else to change vendors or initiate a project. So this is when their boss comes in and says, hey, we need to move on this. And they say, got it, boss. And now they've made a commitment that they're going to make a change. Or maybe one of their direct reports comes to them and says, I can't work with this software anymore. I need new software. Okay, we'll take care of you. Now you've got a commitment to make a change. Or maybe they just plain threw their hands up in the air and said, it's time to act. We're going, and told somebody else about it, ideally. Now all of a sudden, not only are they prepared to engage with content, but now they're actually willing to take a phone call from a salesperson, and they might even fill out a form or pick up the phone and call one of your sales team. The last two stages are grow and give, and I'm going to brush through them really quick. Grow is where somebody is a customer, but they aren't necessarily bought in entirely. They're not repeat buyers. They're not in love with you guys yet. Um, they just bought once or twice. Much of your content will be filtered out just like in C, unless it's specific to the relationship. And then finally, give. This is the point at which somebody's ready to give back. Not only are they a customer, but they're a raving fan, and they're happy to provide you with referrals, and they're happy to provide you with testimonials or a case study or whatever it is you need. Okay, our focus today is really in this see, think, and do. These are the areas that you can really focus your content personalization and make sure that that content is developed for the appropriate journey state. So let's talk about content, how you do that. How do you create content that can be personalized, that is aligned with a particular point in this three-dimensional space we just outlined here? The first thing, don't try to do more than one thing. So I threw this graphic up here of what looks to be the most useless kitchen gadget I have ever seen in my life, because it is trying to be all of these various things all at once. When you create content that tries to be everything for everyone, it ends up being nothing for anyone. And we see this all the time. This doesn't mean that you can't use the same content with multiple audiences, or maybe even in multiple points in the buyer's journey. But usually we see this where we're trying to produce something that's going to be acceptable to 3 different industries and 4 different personas within those 3 different industries. You can reuse that content. Just take the time to customize it and personalize it. And we'll talk in a moment about how to get it delivered to the right people. If you don't have an existing audit of the content that you've produced to date by market segment, by market subsegment, by persona, and by journey state, do it. Don't list something twice unless you've taken the time to personalize it again for a second market segment, subsegment, persona, and journey state. And not every piece of content will check all of these boxes. Something could be very tied to a persona and a journey state, but it doesn't matter what market segment or subsegment they're in. Something could be very tied to a market segment and a journey state, but it really applies to multiple personas. In a perfect world, in a perfect world, you have taken the time to get this dialed down to be as specific as possible by duplicating that content and modifying it to make it more specific. But we don't live in perfect worlds. There's a limited amount of budget and time and effort we can put into our content production. So reality is some of these personalization vectors matter more for each piece of content than others. That's great for an audit's great for going backwards, but you need a tool for going forwards. And here we use an editorial calendar. We're working on producing an actual piece of software someday to make this better, but right now it's a simple spreadsheet that helps us keep track of what we're producing, what our clients are producing, and where it fits in this personalization. So if you're following along so far, you have nailed down the different market segments that you're targeting and that you want to personalize content for. You've nailed down the personas that you want to personalize content for. You've nailed down the points in the buyer's journey that you want to personalize content for. The next step is getting the right content in front of the right audience. So let's dig into the meat here. There are 3 core methods for doing this, and I will come back and refer back to this slide in a moment, but let's hit on each one at a time. The first one is audience, and this differs a little bit depending on the medium that you're using to deliver this content. The best structure we found for personalizing email to get exactly the right content in front of the right person is really a threefold structure. First, each segment or subsegment gets its own set of emails. So these emails could be in the form of a drip or a nurture sequence that goes on, and like an evergreen nurture that, new contacts get added to the top and they filter their way through getting each piece of content, ideally for forever, as you add new content to the tail end of that nurture. This could be batch and blast, where you just have a segment or an audience inside of your email marketing platform that is that market segment or subsegment. And you send an email once a month, twice a month, whatever your cadence is to that audience. Either way, your list is defined by your market segment or subsegment. Then within that market segment or subsegment, within that set of emails that they're going to get on an ongoing basis, each email ends up getting personalized by persona. So now, if there's no change in the copy of that email when you jump from one persona to the next, you don't need to personalize. But if you would phrase things differently, if you were talking to one persona versus another, then you would want to take the time to personalize that email. This is where you have dynamic content areas inside of emails are really helpful, because you can write that email once, the header, the footer, maybe even the call to action or button or link, and all of that stays the same. All you change is that chunk of text in the middle where you're talking to that prospect about why this piece of content is relevant to them. The beauty of this is, let's say I'm linking to a white paper. I don't want to produce that white paper 6 times for a bunch of different personas. And I don't really need to necessarily. By personalizing the emails, I frame the same contents of that white paper differently to different audiences to make it relevant, and I increase the click-through rate significantly on all of these emails. Now, this is great for your see and your think type of content, for people that are just, they're exploring problems or opportunities, or you're just keeping industry relevant content in front of them. But when somebody's ready to act, now their content needs shift dramatically. And to personalize and meet their needs where they're at in the buyer's journey, when somebody's in due, you need to be giving them the content that helps them sell your product or solution within their organization. You need to be giving them the content that helps them rationalize that buying decision to themselves. You need to be giving them the content that helps them get off of some fence between you and another vendor. And that type of content generally turns people off earlier in the buyer's journey, but it is absolutely what they need when they enter due state. So for this, having a system that recognizes when somebody enters due state, the bottom of the funnel buyer's journey point, and shuffles them out of their market segment list and into a think or due state list is imperative. And here's the crazy thing. Oftentimes, this content doesn't even need to be personalized at either a persona or even a market segment level, because you're talking about you're talking about your product. Everything up here, you need to be talking about your prospect. Down here, you talk about you for the first time. So this is your opportunity to do so. So shuffle them off into a separate nurture sequence once they hit that buyer's journey point. Now for paid media, you have a couple of different options here. For targeting paid media at an industry level, market segment level, generally you want to filter that also by some degree of persona if you can, but um, your best go-to option is going to be a CRM audience. And you can upload the CRM audience to Facebook. Most DSPs have some ability to onboard CRM data to target media at it, usually through a partner called LiveRamp. Google has its own matching algorithm that it uses to go and connect name, first name, last name, email address, phone number, et cetera, to a contact. You're going to onboard those lists that you've segmented, maybe even the same ones that you're sending email to, although you can broaden it because you don't need permission in this case, to these various platforms to target media. If you're really savvy, you can use IP address. A lot of marketing automation platforms will let you export a list of IP addresses. And as we've been working to become less reliant on cookies for ourselves and our clients, we're starting to explore more and more IP-based targeting to get around that. Now, there you can only personalize at a market segment level. You can't get down to an individual level because when you target the IP, you're generally targeting the entire company's computer network. Other options include second and third party demographic audiences. Facebook just rolled out some new targeting methods for B2B. They still aren't amazing, but they're there. LinkedIn has amazing second party data they've captured from their own users, much like Facebook, for targeting B2B. And then, of course, there's third party audiences in a lot of your programmatic platforms. Third party targeting can be all over the board in its accuracy, so definitely want to test and get some feedback on it. Second party is usually pretty good, especially LinkedIn. LinkedIn's data is gold for getting your messaging in front of the right audience. So you've created the content with a particular persona in mind. Now you just need to go target that particular persona and market segment inside of LinkedIn to get that content in front of them. Uh, for buyer's journey, there's an increasing number of intent-based audiences popping up. Some of these are actually pretty good B2B intent-based audiences. It's worthwhile testing these. Uh, um, Companies like Bombora are constantly looking to improve and create intent-based audiences based on the content that people are browsing out on the web. Now, I can't say how well these intent-based audiences are going to survive the cookie apocalypse that's coming in the next year or two. But in the short term, it can be a great way to identify people that are in market. Now, again, these are third-party audiences. It's in their best interest to make the audience as big as possible, to deliver as many impressions and make as much money as they can, not to give you the most distilled, best audience possible. So test, test, test. Your mileage will vary. Your website can also be personalized. Now, there are some personalization softwares out there. They are limited in their ability to personalize out of the box. But depending on the marketing automation platform that you use, there's probably website personalization technology built into that. If you are tagging your contacts in your database with where they are in the buyer's journey, you can personalize content on the website based on that. If you have market segment and subsegment and persona as fields within your marketing automation platform, you can personalize on those vectors as well. You have to get the data in, but if you have the data in and you're maintaining it, it can be really effective for creating that personalized experience on the website. So coming back to this little graphic, we just talked about the different ways that you can personalize based on your audience. Let's talk about creative, because creative is actually a really effective targeting method. And we usually don't think of creative as a targeting method. But if you remember, we have that bouncer in the front of our head, that filter that is keeping the irrelevant stuff out and only letting the relevant stuff through. Your creative works best when it sort of polarizes your audience. And the people that see that content and see that it is super hyper relevant to them, they let it through. And the people that don't, well, they ignore it. How many ads do you ignore every day? You don't even know, because you don't even know you're ignoring those ads. So you can use the creative to actually filter the traffic that's coming in. And the beauty of doing this is most platforms have algorithms built in that go to try and get you more clicks. So if I have two versions of the same blog post out there on social, one of them is focused on retail and one of them is focused on restaurants, and I change the imagery and I change the copy, if I'm a restaurant and I'm reading this, I'm probably not going to click. If I'm of retail and I'm reading this, I'm probably not going to click, or any other industry for that matter. But if these are our two targets, now all of a sudden the algorithm will pick up on who's clicking on this ad and go and pattern match to go find more people like that. Well, if your ad is only getting clicked on by retailers who are interested in customer experience, it's going to go find more retailers interested in customer experience. And now you are reaching exactly who you want to reach. So when you're producing creative, take the time to personalize it down to market segment, subsegment, persona potentially to that level so that you're only attracting the engagement from the people that you want to target so the algorithm can go and get smart about who else they put that creative in front of. And so if you're doing any retargeting or doing anything with that traffic when they get to your site from a marketing automation standpoint, you know that you're getting the traffic that actually meets the demographic or the audience, the targets that you're targeting. The next section I want to talk about how you can get the right content in front of the right audience and create that personalized experience is context. Your target audience is spending time out on certain web pages on the web, and they're spending time searching certain keywords. The content that they're looking at on the web is going to be different depending on their market segment. It's going to be different depending on their persona, and it's definitely going to be different depending on where they are in the buyer's journey. The keywords that they're using to search for stuff in Google tomorrow will be different depending on their market segment, depending on their persona, and depending on where they are in the buyer's journey. So you can personalize your content to reach exactly the right people at the right time by putting it into paid search with search keywords or by putting it in contextual advertising on a given page. In other words, instead of targeting the people, target the web pages themselves that are going to house your ads. There's one quick caveat here. Paid search has an algorithm to it too. And part of that algorithm is actually to go punish the people that are trying to put a search ad out there that doesn't drive clicks. Google is in the business of getting people to more consistently use Google. So if you put an ad out there that people aren't clicking on, you're not providing utility, and therefore Google doesn't want you advertising. So when you're trying to reach a target audience by means of the search keywords that they're using, you have to make sure that your offer or your content meets the exact needs of those search keywords. You're limited here. So for example, if I am selling marketing website personalization software, I know that the same people that are trying to buy website personalization software are often the same people that are looking for marketing automation software or CDPs or other things like that. I could go bid on those keywords of who's looking for Marketo and HubSpot and Mautic and ActiveCampaign and start trying to sell my website personalization software. But I'm going to fail because Google will see that my offer doesn't match with the words I'm bidding on, and they'll see that nobody's clicking on it because that's not what they're looking for. And I will either pay through the nose for those clicks or Google will just stop showing my ad at all. Now, contrast that with when we're matching our content to web page content that matches an audience. Here, I could put my personalization software on all kinds of web pages about marketing automation, and I'd be okay because there is no algorithm penalizing me or even optimizing in many cases for contextual. And if I'm browsing the web looking for marketing automation content, I very, very well may want some website personalization software at the same time, and I might want to click on a page about that. So when you're doing contextual advertising versus search advertising in order to nail a particular context, your relevance is optional. You can align perfectly with the intent of that page that you're on, or you could just align with the audience that is viewing the content on that page. Coming back to my list here that I meant to throw in between all of these slides here. We talked about audience, we talked about creative, We talked about context for getting the right content in front of the right person at the right time. Next up, we're going to talk about cookie or ID targeting, which is commonly referred to as retargeting. The issue I have with the term retargeting is it's usually thought of as I go look at a pair of shoes online and now that pair of shoes follows me around the internet, which is one way of using retargeting. Somebody goes and looks at one of your products, you just make that product follow them around the internet until they buy your product. Perfectly valid. But the same technology that does that can be used for so much more. And so when we look at retargeting, we really look at it from the standpoint of we have a series of cookies or IDs, because if we're using Facebook, they actually use the Facebook user ID. And the new cookieless world will be using some identifier that isn't a cookie in order to identify someone as well. In that instance, um, I have a pool of people that I want to target with relevant content, whether that content is relevant to a market segment, or that content is relevant to a persona, or that content is relevant to a point in the buyer's journey. I'm going to target that content for a period of time at people in that pool. So now my task is to get people in this pool who are of that market segment or of that persona or at that point in the buyer's journey. How do I do that? Well, I tag all the content on my website. So every page ideally pertains to a market segment and subsegment or persona or point in the buyer's journey or some intersection of two or three of those. So now when people are engaging with the content on that page, I can add them to the pool. And usually you want to set the bar a little higher than just having visited the page. Usually you want to make it so that they've scrolled or clicked or engaged or watched a video or done something on that page of value before you just go add them to the pool. But you want to take a look at did they do something on that page? You can also tag your links. So if I put a link in an email, and that email is only going to an audience that is a particular market segment, because I created my list off of market segment, or that link is personalized onto a persona, or that link is only applicable to somebody at a certain point in the buyer's journey, I can tag that link and again set up my website in Tag Manager to go and add people who are coming from that link to a retargeting pool, to a cookie ID pool that we can now target with media. This is incredibly powerful for building audiences that are of a specific segment, subsegment, persona, or point in the buyer's journey. Quick shameless plug, if you're a Brilliant Metrics client, we have a tool called SegmentWire that actually takes care of this, not fully automated, but in a really clear, concise, automated manner. And we work with our clients to tag the pages on their website, usually using either a modification to their CMS or custom fields inside of WordPress. Okay. So coming back here, here are the three methods of personalization. I'm sorry, the four methods of personalization. It says three, but there's four here. Um, we talked about narrowing your audience so that you're targeting only the specific people with the specific message you're trying to reach them with that. That includes website, that includes paid media, and that includes email. We talked about using the creative as a gate, so if it doesn't look relevant to me, I'm not going to click on it. We talked about context, putting your content on either inside of web pages that are relevant to your audience or where they are in the buyer's journey, or tying it to search queries that are going to be specific to your audience or where they are in the buyer's journey. And then we talked about retargeting, using cookies or IDs to be able to reach back out to an audience that has engaged with content of a particular, pertinent to a particular market segment, subsegment, persona, or point in the buyer's journey. At this point, I'd like to open the floor to questions and invite everyone, if you aren't following us on LinkedIn, to scan the QR code over here. And if you are coming in through the live stream or the recording afterwards on YouTube or however you're coming in and you did not register for the webinar, please scan this QR code to get a copy of the slides and the recording If you registered on our website, you'll get that automatically. So with that, does anyone have any questions? Nobody's posted anything into chat so far. Okay. So Michael posted, is there a danger of being too dialed into a persona with my creative? Would it be possible to isolate my larger following by doing this? And this is a really great question because as you personalize down to a particular persona, you lose the opportunity of hitting some broader audience in many cases, especially if you're dialing in your targeting down to that particular persona. Oftentimes we recommend that every piece is written with a particular persona in mind, but sometimes you can target that more broadly. So be specific in who you're writing for. Picture that person on the other side of your page as you're writing or producing content. Hold up that persona as a litmus test against that content before you go to publish it, and make sure everything is phrased as perfectly and beautifully to reach that individual as possible. But then don't necessarily hold back in distributing that to a broader audience. The other thing, we talked about this in terms of having retargeting pools or segments for email or a personalized experience on the website for these different personas and market segments. But you also need a default as well. You need a default email audience because not every records in the database is going to be tagged, and you need a default um, experience on the website for website personalization. So you'll have a default, and you're going to take your flavor of that content that is least dialed in, or you're going to put the content that is most generic into that default stream. A great question. And I do want to come back to the one thing is creating content that is everything for everyone is creating content that is nothing for anyone. In order to break through the filters, you have to be hyper relevant in today's age. And then Michael also asked if we talked about targeting methods, Google Tag Manager for Cookie ID, and you want to know if we have any more resources for that. We actually have a whole webinar out on our website in the recorded section on how to leverage Google Tag Manager. I'd also recommend taking a look at the B2B paid media webinar as well. We dig in quite a bit into some of the advanced retargeting in that webinar as well. Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody for their time today. I hope you got some value out of this, and stay tuned for future webinars.